All right, we are in day 22 now through 1st and 2nd Samuel. Um, just to recap on the previous reading, David had defeated the Ammonites. The situation had reached the peak at the end of chapter 10 of the theological history of the Hebrews. However, we realize that not all was perfect, and certainly David wasn't perfect, as he took Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, abuse of power, got her pregnant, orchestrated the murder of her husband, the death of her husband. Well, the reckoning comes in the next chapter. Time has gone by. It's been a period of time, and Nathan has come to David. Nathan is a relatively obscure prophet in the Old Testament, found in Samuel, but yet plays a very prominent role when he does show up. Being the prophet, he has access to the king, as any oracle would in those cultures. He's going to come and tell David a parable, something we find little of in the writings of 1st and 2nd Samuel. A rich man had so many flocks and herds, and there was a poor man who had nothing but one lamb. He had raised this lamb with his children, and gave this lamb from its own table his food and drink. The lamb was very significant to this man. So a traveler shows up at the rich man's home, but he didn't want to use any of his own sheep or cattle. So he went and took this man's lamb, this poor man, and cooked it to serve to his guests. Well, David was very, very angry. Said this man should die and pay, the poor man should be paid 4 times over. Well, that's quite interesting, because this is about David. David wanted justice, and now Nathan has come to tell David that there is going to be justice. We look through the Old Testament, and the idea of justice is very prominent. There are ethics, there are things that you do not do to people. And here David is a king, the one who's supposed to be the special king, the significant king of Hebrew history. And now look what he has done. It's a political cover-up, as we call it. And so there's an echo here. Remember when Saul fell, and Samuel goes to Saul and reminds Saul, remember when you were nobody, when you were nothing, you were humble. God saw you, Saul, and made you to be king. Well, we get an echo of that speech here. Nathan says to David, that God here had given him many wives. He had plenty of women under his care, that's for sure. He had given him the house of Israel. And if that wasn't enough, God would have even given him more so. So why does he have to do this? Why is he the rich man that has to go and pick at what little bit the poor man has? What he has is not good enough. Well, there's going to be justice, and the way this justice is going to be is, the prophet says, David's household is going to be messed up now. It's a mixed family, a blended family, and that's going to cause some complications. There's going to be disaster on David's household. His wives are going to be given over to someone else, so he's going to experience this on some level. Israel is going to know what David has done. So David naturally gets very, very repentant and very, very sorrowful. But then the peak of this oracle of woe, this judgment, is given. The child that has come to Bathsheba's womb is not going to survive either. Nathan tells David that David is forgiven by God, but yet there's going to be justice, and that's just the way things were. So the child's born. David hopes that he can barter with God. He's praying, he's fasting. The child's sick. The child is going to die. The child dies. And David goes through a significant mourning process. It's very notable how much this articulates his mourning. Very unique for biblical literature. You've heard me say before, for most of the people that will hear these videos, how common infant mortality was in biblical times. It was, you would take for granted that in the course of a lifetime of having 20 pregnancies, that as much that a third, maybe a half of them, wouldn't survive past their infancy. And so they did not put the same sort of hopes and dreams into pregnancies as we do. It was often a business transaction. And so I don't want to make this sound too detached. It would be an overstatement to reduce it only to this. However, there's merit to what I'm about to say. Having children was very much about the business transaction, although the occasion of this pregnancy wasn't business. It was most definitely pleasure. However, even so, that's the way they looked at childbearingness. And so you don't become, but so personally attached. But David has, and David's upset. He thinks he can change the mind of God, but he cannot. But he's going to comfort his wife and end up having children with her, and one's going to be named Solomon. Okay, well, this is going to be a longer video. This is the meatiest content, these two chapters, perhaps thus far. So then, at the conclusion of chapter 12, David is going to defeat the Ammonites. Now, remember, just before this event, before his sin with Bathsheba, David had defeated the Ammonites. And so maybe this is the way history is recorded, some literary posture, suggesting, okay, maybe things are back to normal. David was very repentant in this chapter, and so maybe the people are hoping that he's learned his lesson, breathing a sigh of relief. He does have this son, Solomon, with Bathsheba now, so it's like, okay, maybe God's forgiven him, God's blessing him, everything's going to be okay. That might be if we were watching this as though it were a playwright, that may be the hope at this point. However, we go into chapter 13, and remember, David's got several wives, and so he's got several children. Some of them never have lived with each other or grown up with each other. They're half-siblings. They don't know each other. They're very distant. A son by one of his wives, Amnon, falls in love with his half-sister, one of David's other daughters, named Tamar. This guy is crazy in love. I mean, he's really got it bad. He wants to give it a go, and but realizing that it's just not quite right. Well, anyway, he has a friend that's going to counsel him. And, in this case, he's most certainly not going to get by with the help of his friends. He's going to get quite awful advice. The friend says, pretend you're sick. and ask for your sister to come and bring you some food, and then when she does, take advantage of her. And that's exactly what Amnon does to his sister Tamar. Takes her. It's very clearly expressed that all of this is against her will. And then, as soon as he's had his way, as soon as he has raped her, he instantaneously loses all the affection for her. He despises her. And his disdain is greater than the love he had had. He was a sick love puppy. And now even more so, he despises her. That's very odd and very strange. I wish I had more time to unpack that. Okay. Nothing's going to happen for a little while about this. Tamar is going to grieve over this. But David's got a son, Absalom. And Absalom is going to orchestrate the assassination of Amnon, his brother. Because this is honor-shame culture. Your family honor says that you do not let this go. You're going to have to take his life. That's what justice is in this case and this world. So once Absalom takes the life of his brother, he's going to flee for safety. So it's almost as if we're getting some repeat here. David had to flee from Saul for his safety. And now Absalom is fleeing and hiding out, presumably from David. David is grieving every single day, it says. And so his grief from the previous chapter has only accelerated now from the grief that we read in this chapter. This is part of that justice. This is part of what the prophet said was going to happen. Your household is going to be unstable. And so look at the escalation here. Remember back with Bathsheba, I mentioned in our culture today that would be called rape. A few generations ago, we would have just called it an abuse of power. But now it's gone from, we'll just say the gray areas, right? Now it's blatant rape, incestuous rape. I wish I had time to go with the Tamar from the book of Genesis and talk about that, but time doesn't permit that. But one more thing before I go. Another theme has developed. Remember when Samuel first came on the scene, the sons of Eli the priest, they were unruly. That was a problem. Things got worse from there. Then remember the sons of Samuel, they were unruly. They weren't good judges. Well, that's when Saul was called to be king, and whatever positive from that was short-lived, right? And then the sons of Saul, aside from Jonathan, remember the sons of Saul, they were unruly. Remember, one was trying to take the throne from David. And now David's household has become unruly as well. This tendency is getting everyone. And really, it kind of paves the way for the rest of this book. So, all right, I have gone about 40% over my intended threshold. Thank you for your patience and for your readings along with me. Take care, everyone. Oh, by the way, I did want to mention, if you have questions or comments or things that you'd like for me to elaborate on in videos going forward, I'm as we reach near the conclusion of all of this, I may take some time and respond to some of these things and kind of turn it into that kind of forum. By all means, shoot me a message. Let me know something you might like for me to address on all this, because when we conclude 2 Samuel in a couple of weeks, or I want to try to synthesize a bit of this together briefly. All right, thank you again. Take care. Bye-bye.